Would like to thank you, Gurudev, 'cause your children couldn't thank you enough.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming to this meeting. The topic of the meeting is basically the succession of what? I guess that's the best start to it all. Why are we talking about a succession? What is a succession? Well, as far as I understand it, a succession is like one teacher after another. That's how you call it, a lineage. And in India, they call it a parampara. So if you've got a teacher and he's got a teacher and he's got a teacher and he's got a teacher, you've got a parampara. And in the case of us lot are meditators. And we look to a tradition of teachers who have brought this teaching of meditation to us lot. Okay, so how does this connect? How does this connect with your meditation? Well, that's a good question, in my opinion, because I think one can meditate without thinking about teachers of the past. But we honor those teachers, and that's what we do as part of the ceremony of learning meditation. There's an honoring of those teachers, and so who are we honoring? There's some lineage, some people who taught some people. But look, it was Maharishi that brought meditation to the West, this sort of meditation anyway. And he was doing very nicely. He started teaching in 1955 in southern India. And he set up the puja in order to, as it were, give us the idea that we're being taught by Gurudev, his teacher. So he stepped back and said, look, you're honoring my teacher. In your mind, you can think that he's teaching you. And he did well for a decade teaching meditation all over the world. He traveled and traveled and traveled. I think he traveled about 7 times around the globe, if I'm not incorrect. And he was doing well, and so well that he felt that he'd largely completed that mission of spreading the idea of meditation, spreading teachers around the planet. And he wanted to conserve his energy and retire so that he would be at the roots, as it were, of the meditation movement, and that he would no longer appear in public and speak. And he made one last public appearance, which was in London, and a group of musicians decided to go along and watch him. And those musicians were the Beatles. Okay, well, Ringo couldn't turn up because his wife was giving birth to one of her children. And the others turned up. And the rest, as they say, is history. A lot of people think that the meeting of the Beatles with Maharishi was like the making of meditation. That's not the opinion that I hold. I think actually, contrary-wise, I think it caused an awful lot of problems, a lot of misunderstandings. And I think I went into that in another talk. And that's not what this talk is about. But I mentioned the Beatles because he became so famous and so popular and so celebrated, it also created jealousy. And I'm about to read a very short caption from an article that was written in March 1968 by Simon Regan of the News of the World. And he said, the swinging London scene may have given him, Maharishi that is, the biggest imaginable boost popularity-wise, but there are serious drawbacks now he is out of obscurity. Worst of all, other holy men are seriously disputing whether he is a true yogi or not. They say that a few years ago he was a humble employee of the founder of his order, the Shankaracharya of Jyotir Peace. The only thing that distinguished him from the hundreds of other workers was his ability to publicize his patron's methods. When the leader died, there was an undignified scramble which ended with two senior priests haggling it out in court. While litigation bogged down, the Maharishi quietly took over. So to summarize that, what he's saying is that now he's famous, now he's a celebrity, he's now facing criticism even amongst Indians. And part of that is talking. It's the first mention in the West about this two senior priests haggling it out in court. To my knowledge, Maharishi never mentioned the problems. He never mentioned them publicly to meditators, that there had been a problem after Gurudev had died. People in the movement tended to just assume that Maharishi had been chosen to actually inherit his guru's teaching, and I don't have an argument with that. But Gurudev was a Shankaracharya, the Shankaracharya of Jyotirmath, and although he wasn't in Jyotirmath that much, in fact, he very seldom went there, as it happens. He was the Shankaracharya. It was like he's a figurehead of, well, a quarter at least of the Indian population. So if you wanted to draw a parallel, he was like a pope, but one of four popes. But he was the principal pope, the one that had been set up first. So it was a very prestigious position for him to be that. But he didn't really see it like that. He was a very humble man, and he wasn't really very keen on being a Shankaracharya in the first place. In fact, I gave another talk. Was it about 40 years or something? It took 30, 40 years it took them to actually convince him to be the Shankaracharya. He really wasn't in it for prestige. He wasn't in it for power. He did it because people wanted him to do that job. And there hadn't been a Shankaracharya for an official one. There hadn't been one for over 150 years, about 165 years in total. So, in fact, let's be honest, straight away, the Parampara, the lineage, had already been broken. There was a cessation of that lineage. That lineage had died out in 165 years prior to that. So while we're talking about it, we have to acknowledge that and say, well, his own parampara was from his teacher. And that's something that never seems to get mentioned, is that his teacher wasn't the Shankaracharya, and we don't even know about his teacher's teacher. So in some ways, we really don't know our own lineage when it comes to the step-by-step, teacher after teacher pattern. We might find out one day, but I've not been successful at finding that out. But it's a detail. You know, it's a very Indian thing, wanting to know the name of the teacher of your teacher. I mean, when I went to school, I never asked my teachers who their teachers were called. And generally in the West, we don't tend to think like that. It's a very, very Indian thing, in my opinion. So as soon as Gurudev, Swami Brahmananda Saraswati, took on the post of being the Shankaracharya, he was well aware that he also had to find a successor. Really, from day one, he would have been aware of that. You know, it wouldn't be something that he'd go like, oh, do you know what? I never thought of that, you know, like 10 years later. And sometimes people seem to approach it that he was in some sort of fog. He was a very alert person. He was very fastidious. He was very attuned to his responsibilities. And he set about restoring the monastery, and he did a lot of things in order to get that post working properly. And he toured a lot. He spread the teachings around North India, and his first disciple was somebody called Swami Haranand, who most people call Karpatri. It might have even been a name that casually was given to him by his teacher, which means that you eat out of your hand. And that became his name, Karpatri. And he and Gurudev worked very hard. They worked hand in hand in the monastery. To they both they were both teaching, and they were both organizing and attending Mahayagyas. You've probably all heard of the Mahayagya in Delhi for world peace. Well, that was organized principally by Karpatri. And there was a whole string of large, not as large as that, but very large Mahayagyas, which actually consume lots and lots of groceries, lots of dal and so forth. And this was a time of worry about food stuff. So some people weren't too happy this was happening. And obviously, they want to see a proof of, of the idea that these Mahayagyas, these special rituals, would actually work. It's one thing to say, we'll all pray. It's another thing to say, did the prayer work? And Kapatri was concerned that the Mahayagyas might not work. He wanted to know. So he went to a guru other than Gurudev, which was also respected, and went and asked him. And he took with him a friend of his. I'll try and pronounce his name properly. His name was Sri Krishna Badashram. And they went and asked this teacher, and he said, well, something like, you can't prove it, but yeah, whatever. I don't think that Kapatri was wholly happy with the answer he got, that he was totally convinced that these rituals, these yagyas, were the way forward. Because if my research is correct, he seems to have, there seems to be a trailing off of him appearing in public Mahayagyas compared to him doing a lot of protesting. He became more politicized, and he was more known for being arrested and attending protests and being arrested than he was for attending Mahayagyas. Furthermore, he formed his own political party. And it's not normal for a hermit, a recluse, to form a political party. It's actually not normal for them to be involved in politics. The exception, we might argue, would be Mahatma Gandhi. And you could say, well, a Mahatma is basically a recluse, a yogi, whatever. So that was what he was, wasn't he? No, he wasn't. He was a lawyer trained in London, who was very annoyed at the apartheid in South Africa, and he protested about it, and that's where it all started. He was agitator, and he was a protector of people. He, as I say, as a lawyer, and it was because of his well wishing, his peaceful kind of stance on with his protests that he was called a Mahatma. It wasn't because he was a monk. He was interested in religion, he was interested in spirituality, but he was not a monk. But I suspect that Karpatri was influenced by Mahatma Gandhi quite a lot. Mahatma Gandhi did turn up and speak to Gurudev, so they were aware of each other. They spoke with one another. So basically, what I'm saying is that it's possible, and I'm not stating it categorically, that it's possible that Gurudev and Karpatri didn't quite see eye to eye about the politics, about him being involved so much in the world of politics. In fact, it's said that he tried to dissuade him, and it's also said that Karpatri invited him to a political convention after he'd started to run his own political party, and that Gurudev refused. So there's kind of inference there that they were not on the same page anymore. And that could be a problem. In 1943, Gurudev had written a vasiyat. A vasiyat is a will. We Last Testament and will, we call it. And he wrote that will to will Swami Karpatri to be his successor. And there's a problem. If your successor doesn't want to be your successor, he wants to be a politician, you've got a problem about who's going to be the successor of Jyotirmath. So that was a problem that Gurudev had. What was he to do? Who was he to choose in the stead? He wanted Karpatri to do the job. He had a tremendous respect for him. He wasn't about to appoint somebody else easily because he didn't trust that somebody else would necessarily be able to do the job as well. Some of Gurudev's sannyasis were very old, so he wasn't going to choose them either. It wouldn't make an awful lot of sense of choosing someone that didn't have much tires on their wheels, so to speak. So he also had the choice to put somebody in who is much younger, because he had people who would say 20, 30 coming on, but they were perhaps too little experienced, and so he had a problem, and he didn't do anything about it. The problem ran for some period of time, but he didn't do anything about it until such time as he was sick. Now, in 1952, it seems that Gurudev had gone up into the where's Bob? Are you there, Bob? But Bob's up in the mountains of India at the moment. He's up in Joshimath, and those sort of places are good to get away from. There's Bob. They're good to get away from the plains. They're much fresher. They're more enjoyable being in the high areas. And that's what the British used to do when they were administering. They used to take their government up to Shimla, and they used to kind of hang out in Mussoorie and other hill stations to get away from the rainy season. The rainy season is also the Chaturvasya, which is about a 4-month period of not moving about for sannyasi, where they take a vow and they do all sorts of rituals. So Gurudev was up in the mountains, up in Mussoorie for some time in 52. And he wasn't well. That's the truth of it. So that was the first indication that he might not be here forever. He was extraordinarily popular. Nobody was challenging him. There wasn't like a court judgment say this man ought to leave. He's telling nonsense or anything like that. He was highly revered. And even years afterwards, people are writing to me saying, I was a little child then, and I could see what a wonderful person he was or something. I mean, in the book that I'm writing, I share some of those little kind of homilies of people who were children back in those days, and about how their father and their grandfather revered Gurudev, you know. So he must have had a pretty positive effect on people. I've heard absolutely zero words said against him or written against him. So this is the picture that I get, is that he was very conscientious, and when he became ill, he thought, I really need to write my will, as one does. I'm not quite that old and infirm yet. Sometimes I get that kind of thought of, oh, perhaps I ought to write a will. So I'm perhaps getting to that zone, and perhaps I need help on that. But so nothing's going to happen while he's up in Missouri. But gradually he came back down to the plains and he went to Delhi and he gave public meetings, etc. And whilst he's at one of those meetings, the president's mother came along, and she was determined that her son, the president, should meet with Gurudev. So we can thank her for what happened there. And also, there was an MP who went to see Gurudev, and he said to Gurudev, "Come and stay in my bungalow in Delhi, at 7 Canning Lane, if I recall the address properly." Really being overwhelmed by so many people around him, he was camping, and for a guy of his age, that's pretty good going, really. But they removed to Bipin's house, and that's where Gurudev met with the president, Rajendra Prasad. So that was quite a big meeting. I mean, this is the top man. This is the top man running India. There wasn't a discrepancy between Gurudev. He wasn't just some guy who was a bit of a religious fanatic. I mean, he met the Maharajas. They invited him to stay in their homes. He met the top politicians. He wasn't a nobody. It would be very hard to conjecture the idea that he was a nobody or that he wasn't looked up to. You might wonder why I say all this. I am leading somewhere, I think. So he just had this long chat with the president, and he'd been giving counsel to the president about how he should run his affairs, how the president of a country should comport himself, etc. And the president just sat there on the floor, cross-legged, listening to him, and actually going beyond their allotted slot, and he didn't sort of say, "Well, I must be off now." He stayed until he was given permission to go. Why am I saying all that? It's to give the color of what it was really like there. Anyway, Gurudev really wasn't that well, so he gave less public appearances, less public chats, and he decided to write a will. Okay, he got faithful people who he knew to come and help him. He got the witnesses, and he got a legal person. This is what we're told. I wasn't there, and if I was there, I know nothing about it. I can only go on what I've read. I've been meticulous about my information gathering, and I dug together his will, and in his will he named somebody called Shantanand to be his successor. Now Shantanand was neither old nor young, and Shantanand was extremely retiring and unworldly. He'd worked for the Gita Press, the one that publishes the Bhagavad Gita, for nothing. I mean, like even today, how many people go and get a job where they get paid nothing? He was totally unworldly, and that's either good or bad, depending how you look at it. But it's very reclusive, and he in a dream he was told by his guru, his departed guru, that he should go and get initiation from Gurudev. And so he did do, and Gurudev put him through his paces to check that he really was the right material for being a sannyasi. Because as he pointed out, sometimes it goes wrong. People change their minds. They're not really of the right material. So it became evident to Gurudev that Shantanam was very much that material. And immediately after he'd been initiated, he went off to Vrindavan, and he's just incredibly reclusive. He didn't go on a lecture tour. He didn't, he didn't do, to contrast him to Kapatri, he didn't go to political meetings and get himself arrested. That's the truth of it. So it seems that Gurudev felt that he found a safe pair of hands in choosing Shantanand. But Shantanand didn't want to be Shankaracharya. He told him point blank that he didn't want to take the job. And Gurudev says, you don't have a choice. I'm telling you. And this was Gurudev's way. He was a very no nonsense guru. He didn't he didn't. It was non-negotiable. If he told you to do something, you did it. And if you argued the toss, uh, he wasn't interested. It was like, we would see that as incredibly old-fashioned. Well, that's what he was. He just didn't mess with the modern mentality of, let's negotiate it, let's talk about it. And as much as Shantanan tried not to do it, Gurudev said, "No, you do it. I'm telling you to, and that's that. And I'll give you the power to do it." And from there, Shantanam went off. Gurudev signed the will apparently, and it was duly put into. It was taken to Allahabad and put in by his representative, his power of attorney, Shastriji. He put, I think it was him. It doesn't matter which one, but he put it into safekeeping, and he took out the old will, the one of 1943, which had Karpatri as the beneficiary. He took that out and destroyed it. Okay, so what do you want to know next? We have a change, which wasn't. Karpatri must have known, because he'd already refused to be the Shankaracharya. So he couldn't at any point have been surprised if he wasn't offered the job of Shankaracharya. There's absolutely no doubt about that. After he'd refused it himself, and he'd shown himself to be much more interested in politics. I mean, his party, the Ram Rajya Parishad, they went and won three seats in the first elections of India. I'm sure they were pleased to get any seats. All the seats were in Rajasthan, but I'm sure they were pleased. Come on, let's get going. We're going to become a powerful political. He wanted to make changes, and they were very much along the lines of traditionalism, of promoting the Hindu, the Sanatana Dharma ways of life, about, the things that some of us are debating and going, well, I'm not sure about that, about Varna, the caste, and about the ashram, the stages of life, and about the role of women and about the role of everyone. I mean, it's all very prescribed. And there are those of us who might not go along with that. And if we were in such a society, we might be arguing against it, but that's as it is. The lines were set. As I say, Karpatri couldn't have expected to have stayed as a beneficiary, and he must have known that the will was changed, because the guy who delivered it and got rid of the other one, burnt, I believe. I mean, they were pals. He's not going to not mention it. He's not going to sort of say, well, I won't tell Karpatri what I've just done, that I've just destroyed his will. I can't believe that in a month of Sundays. But this is a cold case. I don't know how you guys call it in America, but in Britain, we call this a cold case, where you're going through meticulously and looking at something that happened a long time ago, and that there's still questions about it. And that's what I've been doing. It's not a lot of fun. It isn't the best bit of my research. In fact, I would say it's the worst part of my research, because Gurudev's no longer there, and there's a load of arguments. And today the arguments still go on, and there's still upsets about it, and there's still disputations. And what gets submerged is a spirituality. It's the actual messages about meditation, about bliss, about Satchitananda, all gets lost. It's all about he said, she said, la 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 la. It's nonsense, and that started very quickly after Gurudev died. So I'll get on to that. Gurudev died on the 20th of May 1953. So that was about 6 months or so after he'd written the will, this second will. And he died in Calcutta, which is kind of weird because he'd lived most of his life in and out of Varanasi, Benares, where most people hope to die. Do you know, like there's one thing you know about Benares is that's a good place to die. Some places are good to go on holiday, you know, but Benares is a good place to die. And ironically, right at the end of his life, he was in Benares, but he shifted to being in Calcutta. It is said that it was Maharishi, then called Brahmachari Mahesh's idea for him to go and speak in Calcutta, and that might well be true, but it doesn't really matter. He went there voluntary. He didn't go there screaming. He went through Benares in an open truck for people to see him. So if he didn't want to go, he wouldn't have allowed himself to be paraded before everybody. I mean, let's use common sense when we go through this detail. And he lived in rather a nice house I'm not sure whether it was a doctor's house or some dignitary in Calcutta. And he was under medical attention. They were keeping an eye on him, and he died. He died in the middle of the night. And for this conversation, there's not much more to say about that. It was publicized in the newspaper the next day. I have a newspaper cutting, which I can't show you because I can't get access to my bits of paper, but isn't that a shame? It's just a news cutting. So wow, what are they to do? They took his body back by steam train. I say steam train because it was, and that's how it's written in the history. It went by steam train back to Benares, and they went through all the funeral rites. He was like sitting in state for a while, and then they made him a special box to put him in with his danda and everything. Whatever special things were associated with him, they were put in that box. And he was lowered from a boat down into the middle of the river. And Brahmachari Mahesh went and dived down there to make sure that it landed right. And there's some speculation that he was down there rather too long, and that is that really possible not to die? Obviously, it is possible not to die when you do that sort of diving. I watched a film about octopus, and I was interested in the octopus, but I was really, really interested in the person who was down there with the octopus, who never seemed to have to go up to the surface, and they had no aqualung. It's like, so it is possible to spend a long time underwater. So Maharishi must have mastered that, and give him credit for that. So the funeral rites over, Karpatri assumes control of the ashram. Not really surprising because he was the most senior student of Gurudev. He didn't say he was a successor, he just assumed control. And with his underling, his understudy, Swarupanand, they formed a committee, the interim committee, it was called, English words, interim committee, to run the ashram. And one of the first things that came up as a rule of order was that there's a will in Prayag, in Allahabad, that we need to look at. So they knew there was a will. It wasn't such a shock when it arrived. They knew there was a will because they weren't searched out for it. And they brought it back, and that several days had gone by then. It took a while to get it. And when they saw it, it had 4 names on. You probably all know the names, but I'll read them off just because that's my job. And it was Shantanan first, then it was a particular Pandit, and that the idea was that if this Pandit becomes a sannyasi, it will be his turn next. And then there's Vishnu Devanand, and then there's Parmanand. Parmanand was a young man, he was a student when he met Gurudev. So he was like the youngest, I would say, of all these 4. They're possibly in date order. I've never thought of that before. This is the first. They're possibly in age order. I've never thought of that before. Okay. So they said we need to think about this. Basically, it came out on one day and they said we need to read the will because it was several pages. We need to read the will. We'll tell you tomorrow what we're going to do. So they reconvened the next day and they made a decision to accept the will and to send telegrams out to try and find Shantanan. Now, what I would ask at this time is, why hadn't they asked him to come back before, since he's one of Gurudev's students? Why hadn't they actually invited him to the funeral? There's a question, isn't there? But perhaps he was just, they didn't have the internet in those days. It was perhaps just too difficult to get hold of him. This time they sent telegram, and he was about 450 miles away from Benares. So he had quite a long way to travel back, which in those days would have taken, a day on the train. And he turned up. He turned up with another couple of sannyasis. And he went to stay, not at Gurudev's ashram, but the little ashram across the road, which Gurudev had also set up. He'd set up a temple and a school just up the road or down the road, depending on which way you're walking. And he went and stayed there in what is euphemistically known as a cave in there, a small room. And then he found the tide of opinion was going against him, that Karpatri, although he didn't want to be the Shankaracharya, he was being advised that why don't you choose a Shankaracharya? And this is where it all opened up, all the conflict opened up, was that they tried to stop the anointment of Shantanand. They didn't just try to dissuade him, they actually went to the government departments. Apparently hundreds of attempts, hundreds, not one, hundreds of attempts were made to try and stop the anointment going on. And they failed. They used, legal means. One of the pandits who years earlier had been poetizing Gurudev was down there sort of trying to get them to arrest. I'm serious. He was trying to get them to arrest the likes of Maharishi and the rest of them. It was seriously out of hand. There was a conflict of, you could say, biblical proportions, but this is India, so it's of Gita proportions, of Kurukshetra proportions, you could say. Unbelievable. But you see, Shantanu had been ordered to take the job. So his point of view, simplistically, I've been given an order, that's it. But as far as Karpatri was concerned, who believed that he was on a par with the Guru, he just thought he'd take the initiative on advice that he should be the one choosing. And he chose a guy, I've tried to pronounce his name before, Sri Krishna Badashram. And he'd known him since 1935. So they weren't exactly strangers. Okay, 1935 to 1953 is 18 years. Together, they had worked on the Mahayagya in Delhi. So they were far from strangers. And it seems that he wanted either Parashram or Swarupanand, his underling, to be the Shankaracharya. And just my own four pennyworth is that I think that that's what he wanted all along, is that he never wanted to be the Shankaracharya, but he wanted to decide who was going to be the Shankaracharya. And you might say, well, that's silly. Why would he want that? In order to get approval for your politics, it's really handy if you know the Shankaracharya and you can get the Shankaracharya to approve everything you say. That's my suspicion. But that's got nothing to do with my findings. My findings are that they had this what you might call it, the anointment of the new Shankaracharya, the Abhinava Shankaracharya, the new Shankaracharya, in Gurudev's own ashram in Varanasi. And ironically, it was the very person who'd done the paperwork for the first one who was there on the second one, on this new Shankaracharya, the Bharat Dharma Mahamandal. Now, somebody told me the other day that organization, BDM, were against the anointment of Shantanan. So it's strange that their general secretary was actually part of the team that made it happen. I mean, they really struggled to have that ceremony. The guy who was in charge of the ashram, Govindana, had actually locked the ashram so they couldn't get in. He'd locked the ashram and hidden the materials and then legged it off something like a couple of 100 miles or whatever. He was old school. He was determined that they weren't going to do this, right? It really was commotion. I'm looking at Bob Schulte's face. It's funny because he goes into shock, and it's great to watch him. Thank you, Bob. Being on this side of the camera, it's always good to get a bit of feedback, and I don't see very much of the audience here. So thank you, Bob. Keep looking shocked and I'll feel good. So what happened? So Shantanand was duly crowned. He went off to his ashram in Allahabad. He chose not to stay. I don't blame him. He didn't stay in Varanasi. He chose to go to the other ashram in Allahabad. And then he gave a press release of how people should live. So he gave some quite nice quote. And the day after the newspaper came out with the quote is Karpatra is actually anointing with his own hand his friend Krishna Parashram. He's made him the new Shankaracharya. So he did that in spite of the fact that Shantanand was now. One person we've left out, and that's Maharishi himself. And you say, hang on a minute, you've talked about all these swamis, but you haven't talked about Maharishi. Wasn't Maharishi his successor? Well, actually, Maharishi, and I've done a lot of work on this. You've got to know, I've done at least 2 years recently of digging, delving, and scratching and looking. And without any favoritism to Maharishi, I don't hold a brief for him. But he worked like stink, and he really did represent Gurudev. He gave talks on behalf of Gurudev. He published a weekly newspaper on behalf of Gurudev. He produced books and booklets for the ashram. Nobody else did that. It's hard to think that he wasn't very well thought of by Gurudev and very well thought of by everybody. It's rumored, it's stated, it's in a book, so it must be true, that Maharishi actually did have an ambition to be the Shankaracharya, and that Gurudev said, don't go there. They're never going to let, even if I put you in that position, they're never going to let you carry on like that. So whether that's true or not, but personally, having seen what happened in that, I think Maharishi was well off out of it. And in a way, like we read, that article by Simon, whatever his name was, that Maharishi left them haggling uh, over the legalities and went off and did it himself. And essentially, that's what happened. And they continued arguing in court, and it really was quite monstrous, and it's been monstrous ever since. But my subject is only within that time, and what Maharishi, still as Brahmachari Mahesh did, he went off to Gurudev's family, and they set up a temple, or they set up plans to have a temple in memory of Gurudev. And then he went up to Uttarkashi to build a special place to commemorate Gurudev, where they would have, it would be to commemorate him, and it would also be to commemorate Adi Shankara. And there'd be all total information about Adi Shankara and about the teachings of Swami Brahmananda. So we get this image of Maharishi in a cave. In fact, he was probably on a building site. That's the reality of it. And that the cave that he was built was probably built quite early on so that he could get away from stuff. I've actually been in that so-called cave when I stayed in Uttarkashi before it was washed away by the dreadful floods. So I can imagine both things being true, him being quietly in a cave and also it being a building site outside. So the one big advantage that Maharishi had was that he was very educated and educated in English. Um, he didn't have the caste problem of not being able to travel overseas. And because he wasn't a Swami, he wasn't expected to talk like a Swami. He could actually talk more like a householder. And it's interesting that his teachings, both in India and beyond, more were simpatico with his audience. I mean, I'm not saying that Gurudev's weren't, but he was a monk in every sense of the word. Whereas Maharishi was, like he presented this novel, apparently novel philosophy of saying that the problems about life isn't your lack of fulfillment is because you haven't achieved what you want in your life. Whereas Gurudev would have been saying your lack of fulfillment is because you're trying to find these things. So they were speaking off different hymn books. They were different people. Gurudev was the recluse, the sannyasi, and his point of view was pretty well inherited by Shantanan. Shantanan, I think, my opinion again, it's not fact, it's my opinion. I thought he was a really sweet guy and a really good teacher. And when I first got published, when my publisher, I mentioned, the Shankaracharya of Jyotirma, down Good Company, the book by Shantanan. So that was touching. I was able then to read Shantanan's work and respect him. And I've got a lot of books by him. And I've got friends in an organization which do revere Shantanu. Just one point before I forget it is we can all be parts of paramparas. I was thinking just jokingly, it's like, well, I'm part of a parampara. I mean, I've got my meditation teacher and he's got Maharishi as his teacher. And then I've got another one I've got that I met Dandi Swami Narayanan. So I'm also connected to the tradition through him. So I could write my own parampara and we all could. I think this kind of obsession that we might have is born out of trying to legitimize something, and that's what it's about. I don't think we need to. I think that meditation legitimizes itself, and it's not something we ought to worry about. I'm giving this talk because I'm being asked to give a talk. And I thought, well, I'll give a talk about the succession because that's what I'm writing about. But believe you me, I don't think it matters. It, I'm not talking about it because I think it matters. I'm talking about it because it exists, and we need to kind of put it in perspective, and we need to respect Maharishi. We need to respect Shantanan, and we need to respect everybody, including Kapatri. It's just that I think he got used to being powerful. He got used to very revered sannyasi who wasn't one of Gurudev's students. So that was breaking the parampara straight away. And considering of Shankaracharya Jyotirmaya, that he'd been well honored, been well respected by politicians, by kings, by successor. And I've been going through some of the court material lately, and it's like, what right did he have to choose his own successor? I would say personally, I think he had every right. But perhaps that's a good place to leave it and open up for questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. I may add, or yes, I just may motivate the participants of this talk of yours, this very, very informative, giving more and more knowledge.
Can I interrupt you?
Yes.
I really need to. I'm sorry. I'm quite witless. I have in my hands a very important piece of paper that I printed so I could share it with you. And then, of course, I forget. And this is the most important thing about this talk, actually, unbelievably. And I happen to forget it. Okay, good. Right. Well, as you know, I've been doing this research and I've been scratching and scraping everywhere and finding little bits of Hindi written here and in there. And I came across this page and I'm staring at it and I'm going, wow, that was written by Swami Vishnu Devanand. And some of the pages, like in a bad state, I can't read it properly. And then I find another sheet, because these are scans that haven't been done right. Then I find another copy of the same sheet and I say, oh, I can read it better on that one. Do you know, it's hard work doing this research. Everybody should make a donation. No, I'm kidding you. Anyway, I got to tackling every single word, every single line that I could see. And it was most unbelievable. Not only was it about Vishnu Devanand, it was his commentary of what had been going on in the ashram and his opinion of those people and what they'd been up to. And I'll read you just the very last paragraph of what he said, just to give you a flavor of what he'd been saying. Is, I have been neutral about the orders of Sri Gurudev for this entire time. It is my duty to atone for the sins committed by me. I want that the wrong notions of all the religious people that have been formed due to my being neutral till now in support of the will of Gurudev should be rectified, and the religious society should understand that the reason I had supported Kapatriji's side in the beginning was my weakness and my own mistake. Gurudev should please forgive me for this mistake. He'd basically been watching what had been happening, this attempt by Kapatri to install Varashram, and they're claiming not to be materialistic, not to be doing it for any property. And then he saw them trying to obtain the property, the buildings and the contents, and yet not actually owning to doing it themselves, getting other people's names on that. And he was disgusted. And he was disgusted that they were bad mouthing Shantanan. He was disgusted that that they were having like a public meeting and deriding him. And he was absolutely ashamed of the whole lot of them. I could read it at length. It's a lot to read, and it'll be in the book. And I'm just saying that there was an eyewitness. You don't just have me blabbing on and say, oh, I think this, I think that. You've got one of the key guys right at the center of it, one of the beneficiaries who was actually watching. And he wasn't sure what to do, because what he's saying is that he didn't know what to do. He didn't know whether to be obedient to Gurudev's wish is in the will, or to follow Karpatri, who was a charismatic, popular teacher. He didn't know. Gurudev's died. You know, what do? You live in the land of the living. Oh, well, this guy's now in charge. And he did that, and then he watched, and then he said, no, I got it wrong. I shouldn't have been neutral like that. I should have stood up. And he went and joined Shantanan's ashram. And yeah, so sorry, that was a late a late contribution. So Roland, yeah, I'm back with you.
Yes, thank you very much, Paul, for this very, very detailed description of those days or years of the succession of Gurudev Swami Brahmananda Saraswati, and let me use the word, the controversial followings of all these happenings. But let me ask if somebody wants to place a question to you.
Thanks, Roland. Thanks, Paul. Paul, have you any insight into why Karpatri did not want Shantananda to take over?
Sorry, who's asking? It sounds like Declan, isn't it?
Declan, yes,
yeah,
that's me, yeah.
Hiya.
Hi.
Do I have any inclination? It's difficult. I mean, I know what they've said since in the court cases, but I have to restrict what I think and say when I'm writing this book to when it actually happened. And they didn't actually, they didn't say that there was something wrong with the will. They didn't go and take a legal action that there's something wrong with the will. They didn't publicly, they didn't actually make a criticism of not in the newspapers or anything like that. They didn't actually make a criticism. It's all been an inference. And after the event, if we can look on the internet and find all sorts of allegations or whatever, I don't want to add to them by amplifying them. At the time, there was no such criticism. It's kind of tempting to say, oh yes, they later alleged this and they later alleged that and they later alleged that. But I think it does a disservice to Shantanan. I actually think that we need to kind of take a different road now. I think we need to honor the man who died 26 years ago. I think that he needs honoring in a way that he never experienced whilst he was alive. He was obedient to the Guru's will when he could have just walked out. But to answer your question, Declan, no, there was nothing published at the time. It was just defaming him, casually at meetings or whatever. Do you know of anything?
No, I don't. There were some allegations later on about his level of Sanskrit and so on, but a lot of these just got swished around on the internet. I don't believe, as far as I know,
Yes.
all the court cases confirmed that he was entitled to be Shankaracharya and that the will was valid. So,
Well, yeah, the will must have been valid because it was never contested. I think they started contesting it about 20 years later. It's a bit late, isn't it? No, there was a lot of it after the event. Um, my only regret is that I didn't get around to meeting him. I went to Joshimath and he wasn't there, and I just give up too easily. You know, it's like, oh, I didn't meet him there, so. But my only regret is that I didn't meet him because I say I now feel that we should almost launch a campaign to honor him for his contribution. Yeah, crazy, isn't it? But after finding this description by Vishnu Devanand, it actually makes me think, well, he was wronged. Yeah, perhaps. I mean, look at it in a balanced way. You could say that perhaps it wasn't Gurudev's intention to write the will that he did exactly the way it was. Perhaps he took advice on it. I think that's what happens when you get a will and you're given advice. Have you thought about your grandchildren? Have you thought about what's going to happen to your cat? Therefore, there's a list. There's four. Perhaps he would have just said, just put one. But I think that I've said it too many times now. But I think that Shantanam was ill treated.
okay, thank you.
And thanks for the question.
So I'd just like to throw in my 2 cents worth before my battery dies. I'm down to about 7% on my battery, and I'm standing here at Jyotir Mutt, right in front of the gate that you have pictures of in some of your books and on your website, Paul. So I was kind of hoping that Swami Vasudevananda would be here when I came, but turns out he's down in Varanasi right now. But it's really not that unusual to see infighting when a guru passes on. I've seen it in so many different sampradayas, and but it is unusual that they would be ignoring the guru's will. I mean, quite often the guru doesn't leave a will. I'm just kind of shocked. But one thing I find interesting is right here at Swami Brahmananda's Jyotir Mutt ashram, right adjacent to it, the competing Shankaracharya has his Jyotir Mutt ashram. It's they're just right next door to each other. I'm just kind of surprised to see that. I actually went in to see his ashram as well, but
Bob, I was there in the late 70s, and they hadn't built the other ashram then. But I think they were just about to. There was to move.
I'm going to walk past it here in just 1 minute. I'll show you real quickly the front. But yeah, I mean the buildings are basically touching. It's kind of surprising. But and actually the new one is much bigger. I'm down to 5%. My phone's about ready to die here. But right here, next to me is the competing Shankaracharya's ashram. And the entrance is right down here in front of me. But I'm just surprised they're right next door to each other. And when we came tonight, they were both having arti at the exact same time at 7:30. One for Swami Vasudevananda and one for Avimukteswarananda. Right next door to each other, and you could hear each other. So there's still infighting going on. Both sides are bad-mouthing the other.
It's pretty amazing that you're there today, because we didn't arrange this. And the very day that we're talking about succession,
the priest here at
you just happened to be transmitting from.
Yeah, The priest here at Jyotirmat, Swami Abhishek, was actually saying that Avi Mukteswarananda is not even a Brahmin, which surprised me, that he would be installed as Shankaracharya if he wasn't a Brahmin. So
Well, that's
it's
what
just
you
ongoing
hear.
fighting, which I find sad.
So did he tell you that he wasn't a Brahmin?
That's what the priest here told me. But I actually have to get off the call right now because I'm down to 2% of my battery. My phone's about ready to die, and I have to call my ride. So
But you're all right. But you're all right.
anyway, thank you for the talk. I wish I could stay longer and keep talking, but I do have to sign off right now. So, Jai
Thank you,
Gurudev.
Paul. Thank you, Paul, for this
Thank you.
interview from.
Thanks for turning up.
Yeah, thanks for turning up. All right. Coming back to those who are present, does anybody want to comment or have a question to Paul? Please go ahead. Something says here, all right, I couldn't read it. Now, let me see.
I'll say something, it's a
All right.
fascinating talk, Paul. And it seems that it's very typical, It seems that, like you go in the Gita and Krishna offers his army or his spiritual self to both sides, and, Arjuna takes the spiritual, not the material side, not the army. And you see Maharishi not having any of Gurudev's infrastructure, not the real estate, not the fame and name, not the title, and he does something great with it. Even Shantanand, doesn't even want it, and he's the one that deserves it. And look at your history, Paul. You've done tremendous work on uncovering all these very interesting ramifications and truths and histories, but you're not part of the TMO. You've done it on yourself. It's not as if someone, and frankly, it would have been the most natural thing for the TMO to say, we really want to go deeply into our roots and have a real history of the movement. But of course, as if when you have the riches, when you have the material wealth, it changes your mind. And even you look at the little bit that Roland and I and Bob are doing, all this ITMA thing. In our mind, we're just trying to do Maharishi's thoughts. And you look at what the TMO is doing, which has all these universities and land and buildings and trademarks and bank accounts and huge amounts of things, and it seems to be going nowhere. It seems like almost a law of nature, a cycle.
I'm minded of mentioning this, that after they got Gurudev to agree to be the Shankaracharya, he then did a runner. They were about to anoint him, what we in Britain would call did a runner. And Gyananand, who was the person who was trying to get him to be the Shankaracharya, was being encouraged to get somebody else to do the job. Right? Well, he's disappeared. We'll get somebody else, which is rational. Yeah. And he said, well, no, it takes somebody as retiring, as it were, as Gurudev, to bring that sort of hidden spirituality back to the tradition. And he wouldn't wear the idea that they could just go and get someone else to do the job. And I think we're in the same sort of difference of time, is that, with Maharishi's organization, they didn't even worry about whether somebody was competent. It was just that they were available. It was like, will you do it? It wasn't, are you any good at it? And that really is looking for a problem. I mean, Gurdjieff was chosen because he fitted the requirements. He was a deeply spiritual person and had spent his whole life in the mix. That's what was important. And I think it's still important. And I think it's important even amongst us, this little group, is that we stick to what matters. I jokingly said that people should give me a donation, but it's it's clearly not about material welfare. And I'm more of a recluse than I am. I did a lot of hitchhiking, and I got to a point where I didn't award luxuries to myself, and I still give myself a luxuries. And don't you? You get a habit luxurious life, and I think you don't have to become a recluse. But I think that what you were saying, and I'm rambling on now, is that materiality can corrupt people, and I completely agree with you. But it doesn't have to. Yeah.
Paul, Joel is asking if you can elaborate on what issues the TMO lawyers have with your books.
I think we ought to be talking about the will and the succession and so forth. Um, I mean, a quick answer to who was it? Joe? Did you say Joe? I mean, basically, they didn't want anybody else to be talking about Maharishi. Period. In those days, nobody knew nothing, as it were, about nothing. Is that good enough English? Nobody knew nothing about nothing. And I came along and I'd written a book all about Maharishi in detail. Um, I don't know, some 300 pages or something. It's like they did not like it. And they produced an ironic deal. One of their mob, as it were, not the lawyers, but the foot soldiers, um, actually went physically to my publisher. As they went as a team, but one of them actually proposed this: that you withdraw Paul's book. I don't know if they called me Paul, but withdraw his book, and I'll write you a replacement. So basically, they wanted to be able to write it. They wanted to be in control. And I'm not annoyed about that. I just think it's a bit sad because I wrote that in 1994. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a long time ago. And there's been time, almost 30 years, for somebody else to write a biography of Maharishi, and they haven't. So I think that they were joking when they said that they would write one to replace mine. I don't think that they could do. That's a bit vain of me to say that, but um, I still think that there's a kind of like pressure on people. Like, well, wouldn't do that. You wouldn't write a book about Maharishi. And I don't understand that. It's like, I'm writing one about Gurdjieff. I suppose people are going to say that, oh, you shouldn't write a book about Gurdjieff. I mean, it's like what? Bust the myth buster. I'm more interested in the truth personally. I'm going to honor Gurudev's reputation where I can, but I'm also going to expose where he and us as a civilization are at loggerheads, and there's certainly areas where we are at loggerheads, and and that's fair enough. And he knew that then, and he made various comments about Westerners, and very scathing they were too. it's an open subject, and I don't think he was against people being open. He was very open about his own life. What we know about his life is largely thanks to him speaking openly about his life. You know, we wouldn't know what these instances were when he was in the jungle and when he met other sadhus, when he was meditating here or there. He was quite open about it. I like to think that he would very much support our interest in looking through the back pages. There's more to life than meditation. We need to be inspired. He was an inspiring teacher. Um, it's fine to look back, and I think that that's why I was talking about Shantanand. We need to revere those people who have spent their lives trying to share their spirituality, and we shouldn't be looking at them as pretenders. You know, I mean, what did Shantanand get out of all those years of being a Shankaracharya? He certainly didn't live in luxury. I understand the TM movement gave him a single decker bus, like big deal, you know. I don't know what you're going to do with a single decker bus other than go around and travel in it. I mean, like, I think he was the real deal too. He was different from Gurudev, but I think he was the real deal. And I think there's still lots of real deals. I think Bob's a bit of a real deal. You know, we can all be real deals, can't we? But I'm blabbing. Roland, save me.
All right. Yes, there was a question now. What do you think about Tony Nader? But maybe it's not the day talk.
I don't know him. I've never met him. Pardon?
Yeah. Yes.
I've never met him. He's probably very well-meaning. What do you think? It says what is the group's opinion?
Oh, well, I think we are deviating from the topic today now when we dive into who is Tony Nader and his contribution and all these things we have been discussing with the legal parts and all this. Now, let me say something. Is anybody wanting to say a question still? No. Then let me say thank you very much, Paul, for your very tremendous works you have been doing I can say in your life, because it's sort of, those who are teaching meditation, they think they don't have time to write books about the biographies and all this, but you did it. And now I just observed people were asking, where can I get those books you have been writing or you did write? So I'd say contact Paul Mason directly. And can you say something where people can contact you, Paul, to get the books?
I've got a website. It's paulmason.info. Yeah, that's it. I believe. Is that right? paulmason.info.
Okay.
And all information, everything, the answers to the whole universe, everything. But that definitely covers the books. And there's my work on the canned heat. There's my local history. There's stuff about comics. You can spend hours there wasting your time. No, seriously, that's the best place to go for a list of books. I'm probably going to revise my website, make it a bit tidier one of these days. Yeah. Great. I can't hear you, Roland.
Now, at least you threw a line where to get your books. Thank you, Paul. And I want to add...
Also, they're available at the Unmentionable bookstore online.
The what?
The Unmentionable, where everybody buys books. Somebody's asked the question. Some of Paul's books are on Amazon. Yes, it's okay. Amazon's fine. Lots of people buy my books on Amazon. That's good. I'm happy with that. I don't publish through Amazon, but
Okay.
Jerry Freeman.
I'm listening to this with great interest. It's a wonderful presentation, and the work that Paul is doing is so deep and so revealing. The general impression that I'm getting, just kind of bathing in all of this information, is kind of a question, and that is, how do we level our vision of all of these really monumental and world influencing events and movements and figures? And the reason I say that is we put ourselves on one level, and we put Maharshi and Gurudev and the Shankaracharyas and the tradition on a very, very sort of high pedestal. And the reality is, we are changing the world. We are highly conscious, deeply spiritual people too. But we have learned to look up, way, way up. Gurudev is way, way, way atop a pedestal. And it makes it hard to think, yes, and he was a human being. He was an extraordinary human being, but he certainly would have had, human, qualities, and even perhaps foibles and flaws, and certainly Maharshi did. And the reason I'm saying that is I feel that we have the authority in the world to change the world how we feel the world can benefit by our contribution. And
We are the future, Jerry.
exactly. One of my favorite things was something
I completely agree with you. I need to answer you. I
okay.
think that we look up because that's what we do. We look up to people who impress us. I look up to Jeff Beck, to Jimi Hendrix, but then some people look at me. I think it's a respectful thing. It shouldn't be confused with looking down on ourselves. From what I gather, is that Gurudev looked up to Karpatri. Karpatri looked up to Gurudev. That Gurudev's own guru looked up to Gurudev, and Gurudev looked up to his own guru. I think there's more of a kind of leveling than meets the eye. It's not manners, it's not just politeness, but I think there is a certain sort of a conduct. We can have this in our families sometimes, that we look up to older people, but then they look up to us as realizing stuff that they didn't know. And I think if we don't actually literally get carried away with it, thinking that we're looking up to people all the time, is better. And I completely agree with you, Jerry, that we are the living embodiment of about the past. I'm doing it because that's my task. I'm not doing it because I have an inferiority complex or that I feel that other people should. It's an information process, and I thoroughly enjoy it, and I thoroughly enjoy sharing it, as I have done today. But you're absolutely right. We must make our contribution. We can't just sort of say, well, it's down to Maharishi or Shantanand or Gurudev. We are. That's why I'm giving the talk, Jerry, and I'm honouring others who give their talks and share their stuff. Yeah, really,
One of
I think that's something that I didn't like about the TM organization is it was always upward looking. It never gave anybody the chance that they would arrive. You know, it was just too far for them to get to, and I think that some of us have arrived in our own small way and can be helpful or something like that. Yeah. So
one of
thanks.
the
Yeah, I think you're
one of
right.
the best things I ever heard was something that the Ayurvedic world leader, Dr. B.D. Triguna, said to an assembly of 3,000 siddhas in Washington, D.C. That would have been sometime in the 1980s. He said, "My advice to you is never think of anyone as bigger than you are, and never think of anyone as smaller than you are. Always think of everyone as just the same as you." And that's kind of revolutionary when you think, well, then I would have to think of Maharshi as just the same as me. And I'd have to think of Gurudev as just the same as me. And in fact, I think it's important that we do that. Obviously, they're different for very obvious reasons. They were monumentally consequential people, but they were human just like us.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Jerry, for your comment. And I would like to say now what I wanted to start with, that Avna, as the CEO of the ITMA, Association of Teachers of Meditation, and me as the chairman, in the last week, we came to well, we thought about that, Paul, you deserve, and I think most of us here present agrees with, due to your very great contribution of Gurudev, Maharishi, and all those biographies, you get the Gurudev Award of ITMA. The Gurudev Award of ITMA. May I announce it today and not in 1 month and not in Guru Purnima Day when you're not here. So I just wanted to say that, and so it's a great honor to express this to you, and the document, the certificate, you're getting as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Avna, do you want to say something, Avna?
Well, no one can. We've given it to several people, but I cannot think of anyone who deserves it more than Paul Mason. His name is very much connected to Gurudev. He's magnified, popularized, made him known in ways that would not have been possible. And we're all appreciative and grateful. And next time you talk, we'll have the proper paperwork and design and everything. I hope it looks nice and that you'll enjoy it.
Thank you, Avna. And now it's about almost 1.5 hours since we've been together here. It's a nice time to say, how shall I say, Jai Gurudev. I just may say Jai Gurudev. Jai Gurudev. Paul, and Jai Gurudev to everyone. Jai Gurudev.